Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and frankly quite heated global debate centered around Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's approach to the media. Specifically, we're looking at why Prime Minister Modi doesn't give unscripted press conferences. We're also going to break down that recent, totally viral moment where an Indian diplomat fired back at a Kiwi journalist who asked that exact question. Ultimately, this is a story about the rapidly changing nature of political communication on the world stage. To understand this complex geopolitical friction, we'll quickly run through our agenda. First, the press conference question. 2, the pattern across 3 countries. 3, the 12-year record. 4, the direct contact offense. 5, the critic's perspective. And finally, 6, a new communication culture. Moving right along to sections 1 and 2, the press conference question and pattern across 3 countries. So what's the immediate catalyst for all this debate? Well, it's a distinct pattern that popped up during the Prime Minister's recent overseas tours. It's actually wild. In just 2 months, viral moments erupted in 3 totally different nations. In May 2026, a Norwegian journalist directly questioned the PM. Then, fast forward to early July, and an Australian 7 News reporter remarked on air about his stage-managed appearances. And finally, on July 11th in New Zealand, a Kiwi journalist pressed the Ministry of External Affairs on this exact lack of press conferences. In every single instance, the spotlight completely shifted away from regular bilateral agreements and zoomed straight in on the Prime Minister's media access. The initial spark for all of this was lit in Oslo. Norwegian reporter Hel Ling Svendsen directly challenged the Prime Minister as he was leaving a joint appearance. Now, when he walked away without answering, she didn't stop, she followed up, asking if he deserved the trust of their government. She then posted the whole exchange online, explicitly pointing out Norway's top rank in press freedom versus India's ranking. That single moment, it spread like wildfire across India, generated a massive debate, and completely set the stage for the questioning we saw later in Australia and New Zealand. Now here's where things get really interesting. When a Kiwi journalist in Auckland pressed this issue, India's Ministry of External Affairs, or the MEA, offered a really robust defense. Secretary Rubrinda Tandon described Modi as a quintessential Indian politician. He argued that the Prime Minister caters to an electorate that wants direct contact, and they simply don't like being spoken to through journalistic intermediaries. All right, that brings us to Section 3, the 12-year record. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, the absolutely crucial point to grasp here is this number, 12. That is 12 whole years spanning 3 consecutive election victories without Prime Minister Modi holding a single, solo, unscripted press conference in India. This data point right here is the absolute core of all the international curiosity. Now, you might be wondering, does he literally never talk to the press? Well, there are a few rare exceptions and alternative formats. Back in 2019, he sat at a campaign presser, but he actually redirected journalists' questions to the party president, Amit Shah. During a 2023 White House joint statement, he took just a single scripted question from a Wall Street Journal reporter about minority rights, with absolutely no follow-ups allowed. Otherwise, he heavily favors solo interviews, granting over 64 of them by mid-2024 to selected national and regional outlets. But as reports document, these often involve pre-approved questions or written responses, which effectively eliminates any on-the-spot scrutiny. To put that into perspective, no Prime Minister of India in the modern era has gone this long without holding a solo, unscripted press conference. It represents a massive historic departure from tradition, breaking entirely from the established norms of modern Indian political leadership. We're looking at a completely new paradigm for the world's largest democracy. Let's flip the coin. Section 4, the direct contact offense. The government effectively argues that, hey, traditional press conferences are kind of redundant in the digital age. Instead, they prefer this huge ecosystem of direct-to-public channels. We're talking mega election rallies, massive public meetings, an enormous footprint on social media platforms like X, Facebook, and YouTube, plus televised religious gatherings and a monthly national radio address called Mann Ki Baat. Through all these platforms, they argue, the Prime Minister is constantly addressing the exact issues that matter most to the public. Going back to that fascinating exchange in New Zealand, the administration firmly links this exact communication model to his sustained political legitimacy. By pointing out that he's currently in his 3rd term, making him one of the longest-serving prime ministers in India's history, officials like Tandon make the case that repeated electoral victories fundamentally validate the strategy. For them, the mandate of the voters is the ultimate undeniable endorsement of his methods. At its core, this strategy relies on a strong belief that the electorate simply prefers an unfiltered connection with their leader. By entirely bypassing traditional media filters, the government avoids adversarial intermediaries and gets to tightly control its messaging. It's a very deliberate, very calculated approach.
Of course, not everyone agrees. Let's look at Section 5, the critic's perspective.
This direct contact approach faces some serious pushback, often anchored in data points exactly like this one, 157. That is India's 2026 ranking out of 180 countries on the World Press Freedom Index, which is published by Reporters Without Borders. It places India in the very serious category, dropping below countries like Gambia and Sierra Leone. For critics, this number isn't just a stat. It's a direct symptom of the government's entire media strategy. Following that initial Norway incident, political opponents were incredibly quick to react. Opposition leader Rahul Gandhi argued that substituting traditional press conferences with staged interactions signals a massive lack of transparency. His core argument is that avoiding questions damages India's democratic image globally. Basically, he's asserting that a leader with nothing to hide should face the press willingly. So the real sticking point for the critics is what they call the accountability deficit. They argue that public outreach, no matter how vast or impressive, just cannot replace true democratic accountability. When interviews are scripted, they claim there's no real scrutiny. When there are no follow-up questions, evasive answers just go completely unchallenged. French political scientist Christophe Jaffrelot even goes so far as to argue that this one-way communication creates an imaginary India, basically a world of bright mists entirely detached from reality. And compounding all of this, watchdogs note that India's legacy television news ecosystem has shifted significantly to support the government's positions. Bringing it all together, let's hit Section 6, a new communication culture. What we are really witnessing here is a profound collision of two totally contrasting philosophies. On one side, you have the traditional expectation, unscripted adversarial interactions where journalists act as necessary intermediaries holding power accountable. But on the other side, you have the direct communication model. It's stage-managed, it's direct-to-voter, and it prioritizes unfiltered messaging while actively avoiding any on-the-spot scrutiny. Those viral incidents we talked about in Norway, Australia, and New Zealand, they are the direct, unavoidable result of this exact clash. International journalists are operating under their traditional expectations of democratic access, and they are colliding head-on with Prime Minister Modi's established and domestically very successful one-way paradigm. Now, while his mandate at home remains undeniably strong, this absolute commitment to bypassing the press ensures he's going to continue to draw intense scrutiny whenever he steps onto the global stage. Which leaves us with a really critical thought to ponder today. As direct communication technologies continue to evolve, will the unscripted press conference just become a relic of the past? Or does true democracy absolutely demand leaders who are willing to face the unpredictable fire of an open press? It's a huge question. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the world around you.